Brian, you are a very important part of the Human Energy Project, and we're in it at the ground floor, as I understand. And so, but I want to ask, as I have all the others, your experience with Teilhard. No. Not Ben, no, Teilhard. Your experience with him, when you encountered him, what he meant to you leading up to this project. And I understand that you have the honor of writing the introduction to the new translation of The Phenomenon of Man, or The Human Phenomenon, as it's the new title. Yeah. And so that's quite an honor. So what's your history with our friend Teilhard?
Yes, I would love to answer that, David, but let's start off with a toast.
Okay.
To our host, Ben Cassera. It's just so great to be here. And our cinematographers. I want to introduce my relationship with Teilhard.
Yeah.
But the way I want to do it is to talk about how my approach is similar to Teilhard's.
Okay.
Okay? And how it differs from I would say a lot of mainstream science. Okay, but I'm going to start with the story this is from the Middle Ages. You might have heard this story, but then I'll show the relevance. There are these, these three men are walking, doing something similar. And they ask the first man, what are you doing? And he says, I'm carrying a stone. And then they ask the second man, what are you doing? And he said, I'm providing for my family. And then they asked the third man, what are you doing? He said, I'm building a cathedral. And I think it relates to the contemporary scene as I see it, right? That our endeavor at Human Energy and definitely drawing upon Teilhard de Chardin is to answer some of the fundamental questions. You know, the big, the deep, philosophical, existential questions. Why are we here? What are we doing? And there are, in contemporary society, we have most people would answer, if they're carrying the stone, they would say, well, I'm a lawyer, right? Or I'm an accountant, or I'm whatever. That would be the first answer. Then in the second group, when you ask them, what are you doing? And they would give the answer from a larger perspective, that of biology. And they would say something about that I'm part of the evolution of life. But the third person would answer in terms of the universe as a whole. And that I picked up on your mention. You said, I wonder sometimes if I'm parochial by focusing on life. And Teilhard focused on the whole, all of the whole universe. And that's what really attracted me, to his thinking. And that is so that the third person would say, I'm building the noosphere that began to be shaped 14 billion years ago. Now, see, in that moment, I've just leapt out of the conversation of focusing just on industrial society or just on the evolution of life. I want to say something about how the activities that we're involved with go back to the beginning of time. And why is that? Because again, I'm inspired by Teilhard. There's a way in which we can understand what we're doing as something that's profoundly cosmological and biological and social at the same time. So that is, I really feel like what the Human Energy Project is trying to do is to provide an orientation to these ultimate questions. They're of relevance to the universe as a whole. And now going right into where you and I might differ on, and it would be this, that, well, the way Terry Deacon puts it is that his focus is, how do things happen? He wants to understand how they work. And so that's the question he's driven by, and it's brilliant. And what science has learned is brilliant. But I'm interested in the question of why, as well as how. I want the why to relate to the, like I say, the whole of things. So then, I would say that in my orientation, following Teilhard, right, I begin with an assumption, and then flowing from that is my life work, my thinking, my suggestion. So my assumption is this: the universe is what the exact terminology. The universe is a self-assembling creativity aiming at community. So this is something I start with. So then is that type of statement, is that supported by science? And so what I want to do is talk to you about the way in which I'm happy using the word aiming at, even though it has the connotation of conscious intention, which I don't mean, right? But I'm saying something about how there's a way of thinking of intention at before we get to consciousness, before we get to language, even before we get to brains.
Or before we get to life.
Even before we get to life, yes.
Because for me, life is this watershed. And when we say that something like that extends even before life, then we're basically challenging that watershed concept. And the watershed concept would say what we're talking about here is intrinsically about living systems. It's not about non-living systems. And what you're saying is, yes, it's about non-living systems too. So yeah. I think that is what I'm most interested to explore. But you know, Brian, I also want to know a little bit more biography. If you spend as short a time as you want on it, but I want to know, again, just when you first encountered Teilhard, and a little bit more about just your background also. I mean, it's known to us. Actually, I could know it better, but just in terms of your story and when it and how it intersected with Teilhard.
Yeah, good. My story is actually very similar to Ben's, in that I was raised Catholic, and I was educated by the Jesuits.
Okay.
And so Teilhard was introduced to me when I was in high school.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was.
Were you questioning your faith the way that Ben was?
There's a difference there, and I don't know if we'd have to examine it more carefully. But for me, I was introduced to Teilhard, like I said, I was 14 years old. So I'm not sure I was smart enough yet to have
yeah, you might not have been questioning existential questions.
And this was coming from the Jesuits who were teaching me, so I felt like, oh, this is part of the deal, right?
Okay,
you know what I mean? So I felt, I mean, I was thrilled by it, but it wasn't with a sense of overcoming angst. It was just, I had my.
Can I just? I can't resist asking. I mean, Teilhard was an outlier. So the fact that he had somehow become part of the curriculum that you were being given is interesting in its own right. I mean, why is it that your teachers just introduce you to? You didn't have to ask, Ben had to ask, but you. This was just basically your teachers had thought well enough of Teilhard to have just given it to their students.
Exactly. I never had a sense that I was learning something that was
heretical or anything.
Heretical. No, I didn't. And it may just be there's a slight difference in age between Ben and me. It may be in those intervening years, there was enough of an acceptance among certain Jesuits just to take Teilhard and introduce him. So it was, to me, it was just like a thrill. It was like fantastic. Like, wow, you know, that's the kind of approach I had. The kind of shock I had was not Teilhard. It was encountering people that had a different point of view. So I took the science and the Teilhardian vision as sort of coming together. And then when I met people that were entirely reductionist or materialistic or whatever, that was news to me. That didn't happen until I was in graduate school. So that's basically my story of where I encountered.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the point I make in my working paper is that when you look at the struggle that people have with evolution education, teaching evolution at any level, but let's just say the K-12 level. I mean, it's such a hard problem. Half the people are creationists. Even when you teach it, it's just sciencey, so on, and they're not very impressive at all. And then you have Teilhard. Yeah. And if you learn evolution through him, then it's so spiritual and inspirational and has meaning and all of these things. And so, I mean, there is a night and day difference between evolution as related by Teilhard and evolution related in any other way. And so therefore, if Teilhard can be, if he can be updated from an evolutionary perspective, yeah. So basically that this view is in fact rest upon a strong contemporary scientific foundation, that's a pretty big deal. It means that we want to educate people about evolution. We can do it that way. And there's no one around to say that this is not scientific because we've shown that it is.
Exactly.
And yet it's also has such meaning. So I think that's the almost the pedagogical import of this study. So in any case, continue. So
and the thrill,
yeah.
of being part of this moment. I mean, it's a massive change. You know, I think a lot about our moment right now. The way I reflect on it is in terms of Copernicus. So Copernicus is this guy who has this theory, and then you just sort of imagine him showing up. He's on the west coast of Europe, in France, and he's telling people, well, you know, the Earth is actually flying through space, and then everyone is saying, these would be the equivalent of the creationists, yeah. Right? But not just creationists, also like super reductionist scientists, same thing. Yeah. So they would say, but look, we see the sun come up, and we see it go down. What are you talking about? I mean, this is ridiculous, and we don't see any movement. You know, and they say, well, no. See, the Earth is spinning. The Earth is spinning, and so that's why it looks like the sun's coming up. And they say, if it's spinning, then why isn't the Atlantic Ocean washing over us as it spins? I mean, it was so profoundly counterintuitive, and we are in the exact same situation. Now, here's an example. So we have learned that the universe is expanding. Nobody expected this. Nobody expected this. Einstein didn't believe it. And even Hubble, when he got the first data, he didn't believe it. He found a way to try to excuse it away. But it was, finally Einstein realized, it's expanding. That means that the way in which we have thought, you know, forever, like from Newton is forever, is that's all false. And then they examined it more carefully, and the person who made this calculation is Stephen Hawking. And here's what he found out. The expansion is so exact that if you alter it slightly, the entire complexity of the universe collapses, either into dust or a black hole. No scientist will disagree with this, that the expansion from the beginning is that exact. So we have to take in, now we have to take this in, that the universe from the beginning was aiming at bringing forth life. Now, that is so different.
So what name does this have? This is I want to say the anthropic principle, but I'm not sure that that's what it means. Basically, it's basically that the universe is so fine-tuned that requires a explanation. If it was just a tiny bit different, then life as we know it could not have existed. And so therefore, the fact that it's fine-tuned, there's meaning to that. It's not just chance, basically, that there's some sort of agency that's required for that, or something that's required for that. But you just can't say that something that fine-tuned happened by chance. There has to be some better explanation than that. Am I paraphrasing that?
You're getting part of it. You're getting part of it, so that you have this. The fact of the expansion being that elegant is not in doubt. That scientists, any scientist who has examined it, understands that's the case, right? The explanation is where the problem comes in, right? And there are three basic scientific theories as to how this happened, all right? One is just what you said, fine-tuned. But as soon as you say fine-tuned, you need a tuner.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then that's the idea that God tuned the universe just right to expand this way, right? That's one. A number of cosmologists hold to that. But the more popular theory among cosmologists is that our universe is one of an infinite number. They're all expanding at different rates. We happen to be in the one that has life. That would be, in other words, now you're bringing in the whole idea of chance. And here's the third, and this is the one I like myself. The third is, it's in the very nature of the universe to bring forth community. It's in the nature of the universe. So like I said before, this is my beginning point, right? And why I don't like the idea of a God that's tuning the universe. That just seems so old-fashioned. It doesn't appeal to me. And likewise, the idea of an infinite number of universes about which we have no empirical data.
Yeah, it's not falsifiable.
It's not falsifiable, so it's not science. So to me, this would be Teilhard's point of view. This is the nature. Most people don't know this about Teilhard. They'll say, he's a Catholic, but he's a paleontologist. But when he was forced to say what he believed in, they said, what really is your faith? And he wrote an essay, How I Believe. And he says in there, if I'm pressed to say what I believe in, and even beyond God, even beyond Christ, if I'm pressed to say what I ultimately believe in, it's matter. That is the foundation of Teilhard's faith and trust. And I love that. It means that we're in this realm, all right, that generates form and complexity and beauty. And so then in that way of thinking, the universe from the beginning was aiming at living communities. It was aiming at, so let me put it this way, make it more empirical. If you examine the dynamics from the point of view of physics, when the universe is like 1 minute old, if you examine the dynamics, it's absolutely certain that the universe would create stars, galaxies, and rocky planets. So now we know there are 100 billion rocky planets in the Milky Way. Well, Teilhard just pushes it further and says that, rocky planets are inevitable, an atmosphere, a hydrosphere, a biosphere, a noosphere, so that there's this epigenetic unfolding.
Just by virtue of the large numbers?
Just by virtue of the large numbers, exactly. So there's chances still involved, but it's going to happen somewhere. And so we find ourselves in the middle of it, but it's something that was, like I say, aimed at. I was trying to think about what would be an analogy to get at this. I came up with one. Oh yeah, I hope you like this. The worms, 700 million years ago, were acting in a way to bring forth the first brains. They didn't know it. They didn't know it. So in other words, so that they were participating in the way in which the universe brings forth beauty and structure without anything like conscious intent. And we've been doing the same thing. We humans, right? The guy invents the telegraph. He's not thinking, I'm building the noosphere, but he is. So that's what thrills me, is that I feel like the discovery of the expansion of the universe as a scientific fact took place in 1964. So that was the moment we woke up to seeing ourselves inside this amazing creative event, right? But our moment now, it's becoming increasingly obvious that we are becoming aware that we're constructing the noosphere. Aristotle didn't know it. Plato didn't know it. Jesus didn't know it. Confucius didn't know it. It took Teilhard. Suddenly it dawned on him. That's what we're involved in. So that's what I get so thrilled about. We're part of that. But let me just say one more thing, because I think I want you to feel the way in which there's a connection and between the so-called pre-living world and the living world. And so, Descartes, for instance, thought that humans were free and had consciousness, and everything else was mechanical. The animals were machines.
Right.
Okay. And so then, but now as we've grown and developed and so forth, now biologists are willing to say, well,
absolutely not, right.
You know what I mean? And so the biologists have pushed it back, and some biologists say, well, yeah, the first cell, that's when we have the emergence of what's exciting and intentionality and so forth. I want to go the next step. You see my point? I want to push it further, but here's the way I want to connect. The two fundamental dynamics in the universe, are expansion and contraction in the universe as a whole. Because those two are balanced, the galaxies come forth. That's that whole bit about what people call fine-tuning. I don't like that phrase. You can see why. But it's that balance. The same thing is true with living organisms, as you were discussing with Terry in your interview, that you have this dispersal. The second law. There's a movement to disperse that has to be contained somehow. So life manages to hold it together. So that is the dispersal is the expansion. The holding it together is the contraction. That's what built the galaxies. It's that same dynamic in a microform, mesoform, that creates life. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm saying that so then, if the expansion or the contraction of the universe, if either one of those is altered, all right, you have a collapse. Well, I think it's the same is true with life too. If there's too much dispersal, you don't really have life. If it contracts into too rigid, you have a species that doesn't have evolvability.
Right.
That's all I'm trying to say. And then you go into the human realm, all right? So then it's the movement to community, which means cooperation, and all of your work. So I'm just trying to see these three domains, the cosmic, the biological, the human, as in resonance with each other.
So that's all eye-opening for me. And I think that because non-life did give rise to life, that's not a rigid barrier. And so I think, and so the more we understand that, the more we could actually talk about non-living processes having some of the elements that we know exist for living properties. And another point to be made, I think, which is I think part of the effect of telling this grand cosmological story is, and just noticing the awesome aspects of the universe, whether it's the since the Big Bang or quantum physics or the nature of matter or these things, is that it's so different, and it does make you feel very small by comparison, and part of something which is mind-bogglingly interconnected. And I think all of those things have a spiritual quality, because part of the essence of spirituality is to think of yourself as something larger than as part of something larger than yourself. And what I just recounted, that's that big time. So it's just, so you can't help but think, how do I, where do I fit in with this? How can I serve it? And so on. So I think that there's very powerful spiritual aspect to this content.
Yeah.
But I want to ask a kind of a very pragmatic question, which is that as we kind of set to work building the Noosphere, going from where we are now, which is impressively large-scale cooperation, but we needed to expand it still further. What are the actual tools in our toolkit for accomplishing that? Getting people to cooperate at a larger scale, creating distributed systems that actually work well at the systemic scale, getting people to adopt a whole Earth social identity, as Josh Ober was saying, because that's almost the first thing, that unless you actually regard yourself as a citizen of the Earth, it's hard to imagine working on its behalf and towards its appearance or construction. So there's a set of tools that are needed, both conceptual tools, first and foremost conceptual tools, but also physical tools, instruments and computational tools. And so this is like a massive engineering project, design project. And what tools would you contribute to that based on your background?
Yeah, that's the question. As a first step, what you said 2 days ago, you said really, it's all a question of identity. And I think that's absolutely the case. What Josh talked about in terms of our challenge is we have to find a way not to identify with a subgroup. And so that is a major challenge. Human energy is I'm part of it, but human energy is focused on distributed knowledge, using the technological tools that have suddenly shown up. We're making these, right now, what we're doing is very soon going to be available to anyone on the planet. I mean, that's just to think that out loud, I mean, Socrates wanted to change the world too, and he could shout, he didn't care about written documents. So if you had to be within 30 feet of him to be influenced, right? Right. We now have the entire planet as our audience.
And which one of those three thought that writing was a really unfortunate
Socrates.
development?
Exactly, because it ruins memory.
Writing, oh my God, the worst thing. What's the world coming to?
Yeah. like our worries about certain things today. But I mean, I just feel like that's the first step, really, is that we are attempting to, I was thrilled listening to Josh. Distributive knowledge. We're distributing knowledge that took 100,000 years to arrive at it. And now somebody in Bangladesh in a coffee shop is going to get the whole story right there, like that. And that's so that the realization is that we're fundamentally cosmological beings. And secondarily, we're lawyers or Americans or all the rest of it. So that, I think, is one of our major contributions and hopes.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's great, Brian. I think we've done our work here. And I
Yeah.
think that as we tell that grand story, then we do need to extend it all the way to the universe scale. To say that it all begins with the origin of life is not complete, and you don't get anything, you don't gain anything from that. So, so good. Let it be.
Let it be.